thrilled to have Dr. Joseph Hibbeln come speak with us today. Dr. Hibbeln's a pioneering researcher in the field of nutrition as it relates to brain and mental health. His work has influenced many organizations you may have heard of, such as the US Army, the Federal Dietary Guidelines, which have recently changed. So it's a great pleasure to ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Joseph Hibbeln.
Well, good morning. I'm honored and delighted to be here. I'm a Midwesterner, grew up in Downers Illinois, and my dad grew up in Onondaga, Michigan. So I have a dear love of Wisconsin. I'm honored and pleased to come back here. I'm mostly honored and pleased because I hope to contribute something to you folks who are dedicating your lives to the service of those with intellectual and developmental disabilities amongst the most needy and vulnerable people in our society. I'm an officer in the Public Health Service, and I chose that profession and chose a direction of research so that I can be of service. And I have tried to create new ideas and open new horizons on brain and mental health and diet. I'm not going to give you the presentation that you really need. I'm going to give you a presentation of my work, and I've never given a 3-hour discussion of what's essentially my lifetime's work. But it's the paradigm of food and the brain and nutrition. I'm going to talk a lot about omega-3 fatty acids. I don't want you to neglect the other nutrients. I don't want you to neglect the other critical components of life. As a scientist and investigator, we have to get down in the weeds to figure out with granularity how things work and why things work. And I've focused my energies primarily on this class of molecules and fatty acids, but it's opened a world of the importance of nutrients in the brain, exercise in the brain, and the gut and the microbiome. So I'm the chief of the section of Nutritional Neurosciences at the NIAAA, and I've been there for the last 26.5 years, and I have no conflicts of interest whatsoever. And I make no money off of my work, and I'm rigorously scrutinized such that I don't. I want to say that every person with a brain deserves good nutrition. Those without a brain, maybe they don't need nutrition. Why is this? Well, tissue is the issue, and the brain is this really unique set of tissues and organs with these electrical connections going on. It gets 1/5 of every heartbeat, and it's not just for glucose, and it's not just for oxygen. It has really specific needs, and people with developmental disabilities even have more special needs. You can't just feed the brain Fritos and French fries and expect that it's going to function optimally. Now, I had a slide in here saying, oh, we're a great burden of mental health and psychiatric problems in the world. Well, you already know that. You deal every day with a great burden of mental health. I want to say that psychiatry has neglected nutrition utterly for the last 100 years. And nutrition has stopped at the neck and utterly rejected the brain. And that to me has been bizarre and fascinating. But in 2015, we got the Lancet to publish our article about nutritional medicine finally being mainstream in psychiatry. And that the emerging and compelling evidence for nutrition's critical factors in prevalence of mental disorders suggests that diet is as important to psychiatry as cardiology, as it is to cardiology, endocrinology, and gastroenterology. Diet is the major factor preventing heart disease through inflammation. Why should it not be the major factor and lever for preventing brain diseases, especially through inflammation? So our members of our society, the International Society of Nutritional Psychiatry, advocate for the recognition of diet and nutrition as central determinants in physical and mental health. Let's put this in context. Let's use an old story and paradigm so you understand that I don't think this is a single determinant. Oh, I'm sorry, let's do the overview of the talk, and then we'll get to that. What am I going to talk about for the next 3 hours, right? So first, I'm going to give you an introduction to omega-3 fatty acids in the brain and its story in evolution. I'm going to go through some of the basic biochemistry so that you can really follow along and get it, with the focus that the tissue is the issue. And I'm going to tell you about fish, mercury, and brain development, which is a critical story. We're going to take a break. Then we're going to come back and we're going to tell you about the roles of fish, neuro-inflammation, and Alzheimer's disease, because this is a good paradigm for understanding the impact of diet and neuroinflammation on a significant disease, which, although it's for the elderly, has many implications for developmental disorders and psychiatric illnesses all over. We're then going to talk about the bulk of the data, which is in major depression and aggression. We'll talk a little bit about learning disorders and ADHD, and about substance use, and we'll take a break. I need to rest my voice. Then, at the end, if we have time, I'm going to introduce you briefly to the gut microbiome. And I'm going to stick around because I am going to tell you practical things that you can do. And distill all this research into simple things and simple translations that you can affect in your life and your patients' lives. And then hopefully we'll have time, I'll talk a little bit about the symbolism of fish. Okay, so here's the overall context from the old paradigm of the seed in the soil. Genetic inheritance isn't everything, and it isn't the total determinant of life and existence. So consider a tree. Seed has to hit the soil, you have to have a fertile soil, you have to have a good seed. Not only that, you have to have rain and sun in order to grow a tree. Neurons are no different. Neurons need good soil, good sun, and a right genetic inheritance to make a consciousness, to make a human being. Now, for humans, maybe the rain and the sun is love, and family learning, and human interaction. And maybe the wind is exercise. But the soil is critical. You must have good soil. You must have good brain soil. Otherwise, the fundamental growth can't occur. So when the soil is poor in nutrients or has toxicants in it, like lead in it, the tree can't grow. If the tree, instead of sun and rain, has family chaos and social strife, the tree can't grow. All of these things have to come together. Some are more important than others, each in their own way, each in their own contribution. But if you miss one, you're not going to be successful. So here are real pictures of real neurons that to me look like trees. So here's the cell body in blue, and the dendrites and axons in green, and these little synapses that release the bursts of neurotransmitters to the other neurons in red. Now, this neuron its soil was adequate levels of the omega-3 fatty acid DHA, and this one was fed only one molecule different. And that molecule only had one double bond different. And because of that, there are 50% fewer axons and dendrites and 50% fewer synapses. This is the fundamental unit of humanity and consciousness. 50% of it is gone because we missed one bit, we missed one molecule. Consequence of that is shown here in this sort of bizarre looking slide. Again, animals, this time instead of cells, fed rich omega-3 diets, and this is part of the brain, this is the ventral tegmental area that has a lot of dopamine in it, and encodes and responds rewards. You know, like, I anticipate I'm going to get a good grade or praise for my homework, so I anticipate reward, I'm going to do the work. I anticipate hearing a good lecture, I'm going to get my butt out of what I'm doing and come to a conference. Reward is pivotal for shaping human behavior. Here, these dopaminergic neurons are stained and abundant in omega-3 rich diet and omega-3 deficient diet, which we serve most of the country now. 50% of the dopaminergic neurons are gone. And there's no capacity for reward. The animal is fundamentally dopaminergic deficient, at risk of poor learning, at risk of poor joy, and at risk of substance use. Here's just a little bit more to drive that home. Control rats, completely different experiment. Here's the synapse, and all these little vesicles in there are filled with dopamine. In the deficient animal, here's the synapse, 50% fewer of those filled with dopamine. This is real, and this is very profound. So I just want to say, by way of introduction, that we've already translated this all the way from the animals and the cells and said, can we reverse this in a living, breathing, live human being? In this case, these are adults with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which are dopaminergically deficient. And in this experiment, we took 36 of these folks, volunteers, gave baseline testing and functional MRI, and randomized them to a smoothie, Barleans, 3 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. This is great stuff, by the way. You can't get other people to take fatty acids. It's like a delicious smoothie. Squeeze it out, it's sweet, got lime flavor, orange flavors, all kind of stuff. They don't give me any money. Or a placebo. And then we did a repeat examination of this fMRI. Now, what was the fMRI? It was a controlled way to anticipate reward. You see the blot, you see the cross symbol, and if you wait and you press it at the right time, you earn $5. So what's your brain doing between the time you see the signal and you get the reward? You're anticipating the reward. So, an fMRI looks at the activity of the brain, the regional activity of the brain. In those people that were in the placebo group, absolutely nothing changed in their brain from the first scan to the second scan. In people receiving the omega-3 fatty acids, the activity of dopaminergically rich areas doubled. Here's the ventral tegmental area, and also projecting out into the insular cortex that not only encodes meaning, or encodes reward, but it encodes the meaning of the reward. So we're getting into some pretty profound stuff here, that a simple addition of something in the diet can change your perception of the meaning of what's rewarding and how it translates. And conversely, if you're deficient in it, you're in some ways deficient in meaning. How old is this story phylogenetically? Am I just making up, some new age stuff? Or is this important in the nervous system? Well, DHA and these omega-3 fatty acids are so fundamental to the development of the nervous system that this beautiful squid looking at you from 500 million years ago used DHA in the creation of nerves in the nervous system. It's that old. It's the biophysics. The nerves can't conduct the electricity and can't make their channels work without this omega-3 fatty acid in the neuron. And they weren't eating French fries. They were eating fish, the abundant source. Now, we'll move up in time from 500 million years ago to 375 million years ago. This is when fish began to walk on land. When they came out of Illinois and into Wisconsin, all better. All four-legged creatures on the planet evolved from here, and they took the same nervous system and the same paradigm. You had an upper arm, you had 2 bones in the lower arm, you got some flangy, bony things here. That's all 375 million years ago. Diet requirements and basic biochemical requirements haven't changed. something happened, these bipedals, that allowed and permitted what we call disproportionate encephalization, growing of big brains relative to the body size. So this is about 5 million, no, this 5 million years ago, the Australopithecus, Homo habilis, a marked increase in brain size. And all through the archaeological history, up until about 10,000 years ago, Homo sapiens were getting bigger and bigger brains. And except for the last 2,000 years where the brain size has shrunk. That's pretty weird. What's going on? So the brains are critical. You know, our genomes between chimpanzees and humans, you know, differ only by about 1% in the genome, markedly different. Humans have Homo sapiens in their brain to body ratios are just huge. Most high brain to body, as the brain gets bigger, usually the body gets bigger. Only in humans and dolphins do we see this disproportionate difference between the brain to body ratio. Well, what are we eating that's the same? Well, we know what dolphins eat. So the priority of human development is the brain, as illustrated by this picture. And you can see the difference in the hand sizes, right? But the brain and head sizes are already the same at this early point in development. All of the energy, all of the food, first and foremost in human beings, goes to developing a good big brain. And the rest of the body, the muscles and the bones and the fat and all the rest of that stuff, that can come later. That's not such a priority. The human brain rapidly accumulates DHA. Here's an x-axis of age in weeks and the amount of brain. That's a term delivery, a preterm delivery, and then throughout life. Now this guy gets as much protein and calcium as he needs. In 1 year grows to be a ton, right? But look at the brain size. Human, rhinoceros. Why? Because plants, non-marine sources don't deliver the critical nutrients allowing and permitting brain growth. Homo sapiens evolved near fresh water and thrived on seacoasts. The Olduvai Gorge, where Lucy and the others were found, that's in the Rift Valley right here. It's your great inland lakes. It wasn't on a savanna. Why is it the case? It's the case critically because marine sources deliver brain critical nutrients that you can't get anywhere else. It's not just omega-3s, it's iodine, vitamin B12, magnesium, and omega-3s, amongst others. Why am I especially pointing out iodine? Because there's a history of iodine deficiency right here in Wisconsin. Between World War I and World War II, in the 1930s, the ionization of salt was introduced. The IQ of recruits into the military in World War II was 16 points higher in Wisconsin than in World War I. 16 points higher. Why is it? Because inland dwelling Homo sapien populations, if they're iodine deficient, one molecule gone, their brains can't thrive in the way that they should. So the iodine is replaced. Are all the brain nutrients being replaced in the modern diet that we're eating now? You guys, you maybe think that 50 years ago was a long time ago, or 100 years ago. I don't think that way. So humans, after we left Olduvai Gorge, we migrated out of Africa by the seacoasts. And I've been down here at a cave that had 160,000 years old Homo sapiens, and clear evidence of seafood consumption, especially mollusks. You think about it, it's easier to go get mollusks and oysters for breakfast than to go hunt something or collect something. So I hope that I've stimulated your interest that it's important to think and know about these nutrients. And these are fatty acids. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to biochemistry. Don't let your eyes glaze over. This is actually really simple and kind of fun. Okay? So, what's a fatty acid? It's a long string of carbons, one through one, and the carbons get 4 bonds, like that. And they're saturated with hydrogens. Right? The 2 bonds here, they're saturated with hydrogen. Unsaturated fatty acid is not any longer saturated with hydrogen, so it has a double bond. And with the hydrogens gone, the molecule can move around itself a lot more and twist well. Saturated fat, like in beef, cool beef tallow, it's stiff. Monounsaturated, like olive oil, can move around a lot. And then a polyunsaturated, many unsaturations, goes from the 1 to 3rd carbon from the end, that's the omega-3 end, or 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only plants can put in these unsaturations. And it's leaves and chloroplasts that put in the 3s, and it's seeds that put in the 6s. The omega-9s that you find in olive oil, that comes from fruits. Like olive oil is a fruit, and avocado is a fruit, which is why it's so popular. So, got it? That's simple. You either can put in the molecule or you can't. You saturate it or not. So, this beautiful fatty acid, DHA, has 26 carbons. 6 of them are unsaturated, and the 3rd one's from the end. And it's richly concentrated in brain, retina, testes, and ovaries. Really important organs. EPA is not concentrated in the brain, but is critical for the immune system. This is rich in breast milk and seafood. We can get some plant sources from 18 carbon fatty acids with 3 unsaturations, but you have to put in, from 3 to 6 unsaturations, and you have to make it longer. This comes from flax and canola. And you need the right genes. You need these fatty acid desaturase genes right here. And they have to be good and abundant. Otherwise, you don't make it. Now, the omega-6s are a critical story for humanity. I really want you to understand this. Safflower, corn oil, and other modern seed oils are rich in the omega-6 fatty acid linoleic. Linolenic. Omega-3 linolenic. Linoleic here gets elongated and saturated by the same enzymes and makes this molecule arachidonic acid. Now, arachidonic acid is the building block and the precursor to potent inflammatory molecules. So, this whole series of prostaglandins, thromboxanes, leukotrienes, all these complicated things that just aggravate and inflame everything. Aspirin, ibuprofen, steroids, lots of molecules prevent arachidonic acid from becoming these molecules. As you'll see, these are anti-inflammatory, they can resolve inflammation or prevent inflammation. Arachidonic acid accelerates inflammation. The origin of the arachidonic acid in the tissue, because the tissue is the issue, is linoleic acid. And when we feed this to our cows and chickens and other, it concentrates. So here is how the DHA sits in the membrane. It's one of these long chains here, and it's got a polar head group that sticks into the water. So it makes the membrane, and it's just, it's trivial. It's just whether a cell exists or doesn't exist because of its biophysics. You have to have a wall. I'm not going to say anything more about that. You have to have a wall. And it's got to separate the outside from the inside. There's a polar group that interacts with water and a lipid group. And that's how it's done. It's the basic biophysics of the existence of a cell. Now, also, it's the precursor, the building block to release either the DHA, and then it gets further metabolized to these pro-resolving molecules, or if you start with arachidonic, it makes all this stuff, which causes inflammation. PGE2 will single out this as a real potent one. Now, here's also what I found out I think is really cool. This is a really cool part of science. Right? Arachidonic acid, not only the building block of those inflammatory molecules, arachidonic acid is part of the body's own marijuana. It's its own marijuana molecule. Arachidonic gets released to 2-AG, and 2-AG hits the cannabinoid receptors. Just like smoking THC and smoking pot from the outside. But the origin of the body's own marijuana molecules is arachidonic acid, and the origin of the arachidonic acid is the linoleic acid from the soybean oil. So eating soybeans oil and omega-6s, we've shown, changes the arachidonic acid levels and changes the body's levels of its own endogenous marijuana-like molecules. Changes appetite, changes conceptions, makes people more kind of stoned behavior. Isn't that cool? Wasn't it worth following into the biochemistry? I think that's cool. And then DHA, in contrast, goes through the same enzyme pathways and makes this molecule synaptamide, which instead of hitting the cannabinoid receptor, makes neurons sprout and grow and develop. So depending on what you choose to eat, what you choose to feed your kids or your patients, you can shift it towards a cannabinoid-like tissue or a growth-like tissue. So here's my way of putting it all together. Here we have somebody who's been eating a Mediterranean diet or a diet of evolution, where about half the membrane is the blue omega-3s, and half the membrane is the red omega-6s. There's a receptor, and then here's a membrane where typical US, 80% of the fatty acids are the pro-inflammatory arachidonic acid, 20% of the omega-3s. The receptor gets stimulated, it changes its shape, it starts to have second messengers that digest itself, and because there's a lot of arachidonic acid here, it dumps out a lot of arachidonic acid, goes through the COX enzyme, and creates this whole inflammatory cascade. Thrombosis, cardiovascular disease, joint pain, everything bad inflammatory. There's a few little molecules derived from arachidonic acid that are anti-inflammatory, but not very potent. So, as I said, multi-billion-dollar drug industry, like the Dutch boy putting the finger in the dike, stopping the arachidonic acid. Eat an omega-3 rich diet, goes through the same enzyme system, makes 3 series prostaglandin triglycerides and resolving molecules that quiet down inflammation, and again, makes the marijuana-like molecules here, which impact obesity, addictions, and depression, or the synaptide molecules, which make for new synapses, and it depends on what's coming in through the diet. Is that clear? Okay, so here's one of the consequences of shifting that omega-3 and omega-6 balance, described by R.S. Smith, a citizen scientist in 1995. Higher arachidonic, lower EPA activates the macrophages act as cytokines cross over the brain. IL-3, IL-1B activates CRH, which drives the stress axis, drives cortisol, ACTH drives cortisol, feeds back, and we have the up-regulation of the stress axis. More sensitivity and vulnerability to stress from the diet, activating the immune system, activating the molecular expression of CRH. Now, since you've got that paradigm, you advance here a little faster, a little further here. So here, let's talk about some of the origins of the inflammation. Here's the gut microbiome. We're going to talk about it more lately, but you don't want, just suffice it to say, you don't want a big, bad, uncontrolled inflammation going on in your colon and in your gut. You want to have quiet, beneficial microbes in your gut, not microbes that are fighting you and causing you inflammation. So, for many reasons, but in part one of them is that they leak from the gut into the blood system, and especially after you drink a heck of a lot of alcohol. Activates the macrophages, activates TLR receptors, and expression of the genes from kappa beta that create a whole inflammatory cascade in the periphery, cytokines, etc. When we target PGE2 because it's directly from arachidonic acid, these you can change the inflammatory reaction by what you choose to eat, and these molecules cross over into the brain, and they take the microglia in the brain, which are very much like macrophages. We go them from, usually the microglia are kind of nice quiet scavengers and looking around the brain, maintaining the neurons and being very happy. When they get activated, they dump out inflammatory reactions and dump out the cytokines and start a destructive path. So here they are dumping out more IL-1 beta, prostaglandin E2. We know that those prostaglandin E2s, well, here alcohol also hyperaccelerates it. That's why they hangover, by the way. So here, prostaglandin E2 is hitting the receptor directly on the corticotrophin-releasing hormones, causing a threefold expression of CRH, which is a peptide that makes you more anxious and at the same time drives the stress axis. So you're more vulnerable to stress when you're under an infective paradigm. And you may be under an infective paradigm already walking around because of what's going on in your gut or what's going on in the rest of your body. Just nobody told you about it. So this cascade hits every single important neurotransmitter system relevant to psychiatric disorders. Here's the activation of the stress axis. I already told you about lowering of dopamine. There's a pathway that markedly lowers serotonin and creates more quininic and hyaluronic acid, and glutamatergic stimulation affects BDNF, affects neurogenesis. There's nothing that's unaffected by the neuroinflammatory cascade, and diet impacts that cascade. Many people talked about changes in the evolutionary diet and the diet of humanity from 100 years ago and waved their hands and made up numbers. I don't make up numbers. I find numbers and I let nature tell me what's going on. We got data from 273 different foods consumed every year in the U.S. from 1909 to 1999. This is the biggest change in the diet of Homo sapiens since we inhabited the Fertile Crescent 12,000 years ago and started planting and eating grains. In 1909, there was no soybean oil and virtually no corn oil consumed in the U.S., as it had been way back there, because humans didn't eat seed oils. They ate plants, or animals that ate plants. In World War II, we found that hydrogenation of oils was very economically profitable. We could process foods. We could make donuts. Beautiful things happen, right? So soybean oil didn't exist in 1909. Soybean oil alone is 20% of all of our calories, and about half of the content of soybean oil is linoleic acid, which is that omega-6 fatty acid. We need to be concerned about this. This is the largest uncontrolled experiment that has ever existed in humanity, and we can't just say that it's right. I've done a lot of work taking diets that mimic what's going on here and comparing them to what's going on here. We see a huge amount of beneficial changes. So here's another graphic description of it. Plants and leaves, in traditional farming, lots of omega-3s compared to industrial farming and corn and soy. It flows from the plants into the food supply. Farm beef versus grass-fed beef, lamb, etc. And then from the food supply flows into our bodies. I showed you that 80% of the tissue was the omega-6 fatty acids here. I think that's beyond urgent action, as opposed to traditional Mediterranean diets that put you here, or Japanese diets, or even Inuit diets that put you over there. Now you've got the basic concept of why the tissue is the issue. That's from my histology teacher in medical school in Illinois, Harry Monson, actually Major Actus. So here's one way of looking at that, and we took data from the US Army. They're about 70% omega-3s, or another way, the omega-3 index of 2 or less. Compared to 50-50 Mediterranean, you may want to say, how can I get there? Well, you can eat a soybean oil diet, 8% calories from linoleic acid. You can take supplements, for example, and you need about 2,000 milligrams a day to get here. You can do that. That's very achievable. Or you can go back to a Mediterranean diet where the linoleic acid is down to 2 to 3% and still take omega-3s, and the same amount of omega-3s push you way out there. So that's less burden on the world's fisheries, less burden on your body, balance the 3s and 6s. We're going to come back to this. So by the way, we just mimicked, actually Sheila Innes' group mimicked these contemporary evolutionary diets in animals and cells, and saw the brain composition of DHA went up with the evolutionary and supplemented diets, and that dietary change profoundly affected the number of secondary neurites and the frontal neurites. It changes brains, if that's what you're concerned with. At first, omega-6 diet. Michael Crawford, my dear friend, says, unless we prioritize brain nutrition, we become a race of morons. Future of health and intelligence in humanity is at stake, and it's the most serious threat of our times. 1972. Maybe he's right. So I'm going to speak a little bit about fish and mercury in development, because fish is a great food that contains many nutrients, and I've been involved in this question for about 15 years. This is what most people think about when they hear fish and that mercury's in fish. This was a huge advertising campaign from the Environmental Working Group, 2004. Kids are being poisoned from deadly mercury from power plants. Well, there's a lot of assumptions there. First of all is that the predominance of mercury in fish is coming from power plants, and it's not. Mercury in fish is coming from undersea volcanoes. Very few circumstances in China we see rice and other contamination from mercury, or a real problem with gold mining in especially artisanal areas. And that put to advice in 2004 by the EPA and FDA, eat no more than 2 to 3 meals a week and avoid these species completely. And they said shellfish and fish are important for their nutritional benefits. However, they did the calculations of what you should eat only about avoiding mercury. They said nutritional benefits are important, they put no numbers behind it. So this really pissed us off. We said, you've got to make advice based on numbers, based on information. So we went through this huge effort to get them to reconsider and rework the advice. Now, I want to let you know, this is primary data that originated this whole issue of mercury in fish. Well, the mercury actually came from a pilot whale in the Faroe Islands that made this determination. So here's the x-axis, and the x-axis, the amount of mercury in mom's cord blood. And on the y-axis is a test of verbal skills and cognition. Now, Matthew's going to look at this data, and he's going to say, huh? Where's the association? That just looks like a scatter plot. You can't, that's not powerful. Well, if you squeeze the data and you can finally get a 0.05 detectable difference way out here. Now, just to be safe, they made the advice for Mercury, just add a tenfold uncertainty factor for safety. We'll put it there. And then we'll kind of extrapolate back. That's the basis. That is the basis of worldwide recommendations for fish consumption and mercury exposure that drives everyone and drives the scare that fish is contaminated with mercury. So cartoonists thought about this and really illustrated well that when you're advising to eat a fish also is a source of low-calorie proteins, multiple vitamins and minerals, good heart-healthy food, positive effects of omega-3 fatty acids, and there's a hypothetical mercury risk. Now, mathematically, this is about right, except that that is way too big.
It is.
I've done the numbers. So we did this work in the Alzheimer population and enrolled 14,500 pregnant moms. Kids are now actually 32 years old. There are millions of variables. Gene Golding is fabulous with this. We published this in the Lancet. Here's the estimated omega-3 fatty acids from seafood in 6 different groups of moms. As the moms are eating less and less fish, here, and this is the percentage of children who have low verbal IQ. Here. Now, if moms are eating the most fish, 15% of the kids have low verbal IQ. Low verbal IQ is a little developmental deficit, isn't it?
Maybe.
Relevant to your group. Here, moms are eating no fish, 30% of the kids have low IQ. 30% have low IQ instead of 15%. Now we crunched the data, we put in 29 different confounding variables, it stays robust. When we took the specific advice to eat above or below 340 grams per week, we found that when women had been ignoring the advice, they did the best. And if they had been following the advice, their kids did the worst. And it translated not only to IQ and the residual effect of brain development, but it also impacted fine motor scores, social scores, and other social development scores.
Can I
We then took the population, and yes, you wanted to say something.
I'm sorry. What is the definition of a low IQ?
So in this case, we defined it as being in the bottom quartile of IQ, which is what the field was using.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So then we took the population and divided it into mothers who ate fish and mothers who did not eat fish. And lo and behold, even though mothers ate no fish, they still had substantial levels of mercury in their blood. And when they ate no fish, there was no relationship, an odd data point here, but no relationship between higher mercury and IQ of their kids at all. However, when mothers were eating fish and getting mercury exposure, some mercury exposure from fish, the higher levels of mercury were predicting higher levels of IQ. Now, it wasn't because mercury was making them smarter, because mercury was a tag or a marker of eating more fish. So despite mercury being present in the fish, the overall net effect is higher IQ. So this extended not only to IQ, but not surprisingly, here's mother eating no fish, here's mothers eating fish, and here's the science and math scores of their kids going up when the mercury's going up in the kids. Oh, we made a lot of people angry. kind of contrarian. So how can we be sure? I should go quickly through this. It's really elegant science. I'm just doing it for Matthew. He's kind of a science geek. So how can we be sure? We use genetic Mendelian randomization, and we use differences in the variants of the genes called single nucleotide polymorphisms, and these SNPs are randomly distributed across the population. Whether you can elongate and saturate well or poorly, you didn't take a pill to it, it's randomly distributed in the population. The group has a random distribution of these genes. So it's like a randomized placebo-controlled trial. And some of these SNPs impair the biological activity of nutrients. For example, the FADS variants impair that conversion of the 18 carbon fatty acids to the 22 carbon fatty acids. So there's the gene variant there. And here's our pathway. And there's the conversion of linolenic to arachidonic, and then later DHA. And this is the good gene, CC variant. And when this becomes the GG variant, you get more precursors and fewer products, as if somebody put a block in the pipeline. Okay? So you have this gene variant. You take these in your diet, you can't convert them. You can't convert them to EPA, DHA, arachidonic. Stay as the less active 18 carbon fatty acids. Got that? You have one variant or the other variant. So, really cool experiment. All the kids at this time in Alzbach, the only formulas available were infant formulas that only had those 18 carbon precursors. So we looked at just the infants who were solely fed infant formula. So if they there's the ones that are not breastfed in gray and breastfed. So if they were not breastfed and solely dependent on infant formula and they couldn't make it, they had lower IQ by 6 points. And if they were breastfed, they got the fatty acids directly and it rescued them. They didn't need a gene. So here, diet and total mercury status. The maternal diet really only accounted for 20% of the variance in mercury. The seafood only accounted for about 8%. And higher maternal total mercury predicted higher IQ rather than lower IQ. We changed the dietary guidelines of 2010 with this data and implemented it. And the FDA then in 2014 did brilliant calculations, 163 pages, and calculated the net effects of fish. So here's higher fish consumption and a change in IQ. So the component of mercury, the more fish you're eating, the more mercury you're getting exposed to, you get a slight decrease in the IQ. Now here's the nutritional benefits of fish. They rise sharply from 0 to 3 times a week, and kind of still getting higher. So when you put the two components together, there's the net effect of eating fish. For almost the entire span, more fish, commercial fish, than you could possibly eat in a week, you're getting a net beneficial effect of fish, despite a small contribution of mercury. Net zero effect. So here's tuna, still even tuna, which is kind of a worst case scenario. Here's the middle line. You need to eat just a huge amount of tuna every week before you find a net adverse effect through the most part of the kids. So we did a lot of work with this. Net effect summary. Typical benefits up to 12 ounces is about 5 IQ points. Loss to mercury, 0.01 IQ points. Yes, mercury has an effect. You'll lose 0.01 IQ points. So don't eat fish. So you can lose 5 IQ points. So what was the net effect of doing this all? We went through this, went to the White House several times from 2007 to 2004, said, this advice was only based on mercury. It was wrong. Totally neglected the nutritional benefits of fish. Thought we had the whole thing teed up. Right before the end of the Obama administration, the last day, the advice was issued, revised advice was issued, solely based on the calculation of avoiding mercury, and completely neglecting any of the nutritional benefits of fish. And there's the data right there. These are the best fish because of that mercury level. These are good fish because of that mercury level. Where's the nutrient benefits? I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit angry about that. It's bad science and it's translated to bad policy. We, a group of us, put together an analysis of fish as a whole food. We found 34 peer-reviewed manuscripts. We looked at fish as a whole food, as the unit, not just mercury, not just nutrients, fish as a whole food. 34 papers, 90,000 mother-infant pairs, 20,000 kids. 33 of these manuscripts say there's a benefit of fish consumption in neurodevelopment, despite a contribution of mercury. One paper reports null effects or no effects, and I'm an author. Okay? The overwhelming weight of evidence is one, eat fish for neurodevelopment. I hope that wasn't too long. We're going to look at time. I'm probably about 20 minutes or half an hour ahead. I'm going to shoot through this section in paradigm, and we're going to take a break in a minute. This is about fish, neuroinflammation, and Alzheimer's disease. Again, Alzheimer's disease is a paradigm of the neuroinflammatory disorders. Here's beautiful data from Felice Jacka looking at adults at baseline and then a 4-year follow-up and their brain sizes. So at baseline, people's brains were bigger, and at 4 years they were smaller, and if they were eating a good diet, brains stayed bigger. If they were eating a poor diet, brains were smaller. That, by the way, applies to us, our age group. With Alzheimer's disease, there's a beautiful meta-analysis that means a summary of the work, the relationships between dietary patterns, not just a single nutrient, specific foods, and the micronutrients for Alzheimer's disease and late-life cognitions. And it says there's some evidence for diet and changes in brain structure and function associated with cognitive decline due to Alzheimer's pathology, and the combinations of food and nutrients in certain patterns may act synergistically to provide stronger health effects. So basically the bottom line is that these 3 diets were associated with slow rates of cognitive decline, relationships, Mediterranean diet patterns, the DASH diet, which they've now modified to include fish, and MIND diet, Mediterranean DASH diet for neurodegenerative delay, the MIND diet by Martin Morris in Chicago. And some foods traditionally considered harmful have been rehabilitated. Eggs and red meat. By the way, red meat is really important for your brain, and I won't be able to go into it except in the questions, but we found a lot of data that low meat and vegetarian diets are creating mental health problems. Low meat and vegetarian diets are creating mental health problems because primarily they cause deficiencies in vitamin B12. And if you have an already vulnerable brain and you're depriving of vitamin B12, it doesn't function as well, and also iron. Doubling or tripling of the cutting and self-harm in adolescence, and other problems. Be careful of purely vegetarian and vegetable-based diets. Meat is important for the brain. All right, cognitive decline, sidetrack. Foods with protective effects of cognitive decline, elevated fish consumption, higher monosaturates, higher polyunsaturates. Oh, by the way, if you have Alzheimer's disease or are suspected of a dementia, the first rule out is whether you have vitamin B12 deficiency. Because you may, as we age, many of us lose the capacity to absorb vitamin B12 because we lose intrinsic factor in the gut. So it comes in the gut and doesn't get absorbed. So you should check for vitamin B12. All right, so a little bit of the pathology of Alzheimer's disease. a lot of cascades wind up with the accumulation of beta amyloid, and these create plaques. Once the beta amyloid plaques are created, what's really destructive is that they activate the microglia, activate the inflammatory cascades, and then cause synaptic dysfunction. With exciting, accelerating the neuroinflammation. So here, normally, you have beneficial microglia, clean up myelin and clean up debris, and release growth factors and kind of assist the neurons. And in Alzheimer's disease, with this beta amyloid, it activates the microglia and they kind of get into a hyperactive defense. And they know instead of being healthy and scavenge, they start to be acting like an inflamed joint and dump a lot of inflammatory molecules out in cascades. What's been really important in this whole story is to understand that inflammation is good at the right time for the right reason, and you need to shut it down when it stops doing what it should do. And one of the reasons I find omega-3 fatty acids so fascinating is that later in their release in this cascade, it is molecules from EPA and DHA, resolvins and neuroprotectants, that are released later in the inflammatory cascade that are critical for making the break and stopping the inflammation after it's been useful. If you don't have any breaks, just let it drive by arachidonic acid and other processes. And since I know you all really wanted to see all of the molecules' names, I'll put them on a slide for you. Now the quote-unquote meat of the talk. Fish omega-3 fatty acids in major depression, in aggression, and substance abuse. And this has been one of the main focus of areas of my work and my career. And I think is terribly important for you and frankly for the world to get a better handle on it. So, a long time ago, when I first came to the NIH, I asked a simple thought experiment, and that is that if omega-3s are so important to the brain and the nervous system, will people have a greater risk of depression if they live in a country that's eating less fish? Because depression is the sentinel, one of the sentinels of brain ill health and disturbance. So these data points were all from Myrna Weissman in one publication, and this was good quality data from Japan. So this indicates that in countries where little fish is consumed, the risk of major depression is 50 times higher than in countries where a lot of fish is consumed. This opened up questions and started a revolution to determine if this is just an association between countries and caused by weird differences in countries, or does it have biochemical and clinical reality? So, since we actually preceded a hypothesis publication in 1995, and this has been the explosion in publications in omega-3 fatty acids and major depression. And with more and more data and more publications, you get a better idea of what's probably right. So I want to summarize what we know about omega-3 fatty acid, highly unsaturated CP and DHA, and dysphoric disorders. So in major depression, the causal mechanisms, there are 54 studies of technology, 17 case control studies, 52 RCTs, 6 meta-analyses, and I can tell you that in my opinion, the summary of the field is that yes, omega-3 fatty acids are effective in treating major depression, and especially in treatment-resistant major depression. And for all the reasons I told you. First, nourish the brain. It's a biological reality. Tissue is the issue. Tissue has to be well-nourished and healthy first, and it'll absorb everything better. Psychiatric treatments, pharmaceuticals, etc. ADHD has been intensely interesting. There's at least 15 case-control trials now. There's 12 or 15 RCTs. There's been 2 meta-analyses. The answer is yes, they're effective in ADHD, but it's not a big effect. It's a small modifying effect. Not as clinically significant, but yes, it's there, and yes, it's real, and there's a diversity of response in kids, and we'll get into this more later. Aggression and violence, we're going to describe more in depth. There's big effects, 40% reductions in felony violence and aggression, not much data on anxiety, substance abuse and alcohol, I'm hopeful, we need more data, and suicide, again, it's hopeful. So these areas, these 3, I think we really have more solid ground to move forward with. So in 2015, I'm very proud, I'm enormously proud, I changed a sentence. In 2015, for the first time, the Dietary Guidelines of Americans acknowledge that diet impacts the brain. Very confidently. Emerging evidence also suggests there may exist relationships between eating patterns and neurocognitive disorders. And it was basically on the data. They were interested in evaluating dietary patterns, so they only evaluated and looked at manuscripts that dietary pattern. If it said fish consumption, they threw it out. If it said omega-3 trial randomized, they threw it out. They just wanted to know about dietary patterns. So I want to look beyond the data for dietary patterns. Dietary patterns are important as a whole, but it doesn't give you granularity of molecular specificity in action. So we're going to talk a little bit about dietary patterns. We're going to talk about specific foods in the dietary patterns, fish and olive oil. We're going to talk about specific nutrients in the fish. We're going to talk about some of the randomized trials, and we're not going to talk about mechanisms because we had enough of that in the first hour. So Mediterranean diet for major depression. So a meta-analysis, that is a grouping, a statistical combining of 9 different studies. Back in 2013, there's now 15 or 16 studies, that's the same thing. Mediterranean diets, people have 30% less depression than their peers when they're eating the Mediterranean diet. When we look specifically at fish consumption as a dietary component, and that was done in some 90 or 9 to 10,000 subjects. Fish consumption in major depression, people consuming higher levels of fish, 20% less likely, and that was 26 studies with 150,000 subjects combined in those studies. So now we're getting to really big numbers where we can make more definitive claims. Within the fish, when we look just at static levels of omega-3 fatty acids, 14 studies with 3,000 participants, big effect size. When you look at the tissue, bloods and tissue, lower omega-3 fatty acids are strongly predicted greater depression and greater psychopathology. Then we want to know randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials, because this is association, and we want to try to be more confident that there's a singular causation. So in these trials, it's important to know, to look at EPA-rich formulations, and they appear to be more clinically effective for depression. And the bottom line is that these effects are at least as strong as conventional therapies of psychotherapy and pharmaceuticals for depression. We look at DHA and EPA. See, your biochemistry background comes in handy. And this was work published by Brian Callahan and John Davis. So a lot of people have done trials of omega-3s in depression in clinical populations that don't have depression. And they tried to reduce the depression in these populations that don't have depression. So I'm going to take this room, I'm going to split it in half, and I'm going to give this half an antibiotic to treat their pneumonia. I'm going to give that half an antibiotic to treat their pneumonia. At the end of the day, I'm going to tell you that antibiotics are completely ineffective because nobody's pneumonia got better. Same thing's going on here. Drives me nuts. Sorry. So anyway, when we look at patients that actually have psychiatric disorders, strikingly and surprisingly, those formulations rich in DHA had no effect. Those rich in EPA had a big clinical effect. And so here's the difference: mild, moderate, and strong effect sizes. Mild effect size of 0.3, moderate 0.6. We're looking at 0.8, really big, strong clinical effect sizes. How do we compare this to, there's EPA, how do we compare it to antidepressants and to psychotherapy? Well, psychotherapy is useful, and it's marvelous, and it's important, and its effect size is usually less than 0.2. Pharmaceuticals, very important, very useful. Effect sizes maybe 0.2, 0.3. EPA, DHA, much more effective.
So for that effect, how long?
Louder, please.
For that effect that you have there, how long were they on? Like, how long until they noticed effect?
So omega-3 fatty acids really need a good, when you give them to somebody and start them, give them a good solid month to start to turn over their lipid profile in the bodies. Most of the trials here from this data are based on trials of at least 10 weeks or optimally 12 weeks and beyond. Some people have immediate effects. This is translated into recommendations for omega-3 highly unsaturated for depression and Psychiatric Associations worldwide, Canadians, US Dietary Guidelines, APA twice, and Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the French. It's real. It's a real deal. We're standing on good ground. So, when kids eat omega-3 fatty acids, do they have better academic performance or behavior? So, here's data, observational data, not on omega-3 specifically, but as the unit of fish in Sweden. And here is increases in children's grade score. 0 if it's less than a fish meal a week. Here's 1 fish meal a week, and here's greater than 1 fish meal a week. In comparison, let's get out of here. Sorry, this is the impact of being male versus female. Females are much smarter than guys. You all knew that. So the effect of fish it's helpful. It gets you more to being like a smart girl. Oh gosh, I'm sorry about this. I guess I can't hear that. I'm going to just skip this. I have a lot of data.
We were wondering where that was coming from.
So there's been intense interest in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and nutritional components to it. Much work on red dyes, much work on A4 proteins in milk and glutamate. I don't have that background and slides for you here. I'm going to talk about the impact of omega-3s. As I say with all of these things, I know this field the best, but I don't want to neglect the role of other nutrients and other diet allergies as well. You have to invite other speakers. For ADHD, again, I told you that there is a clinical effect size. Here's what's called a forest plot, and if the median and the line is over on this side, it favors the omega-3 fatty acid, and if it was on this side, it favors the placebo. So you can see that for each of these trials, the middle and the confidence intervals are all favoring the omega-3 fatty acids and showing that there is an effect, and you statistically summarize them in this sort of black diamond here. The confidence intervals don't cross 0, and it shows that there's an effect of the omega-3s. Again, it's about 0.3 or 0.4. So it's not a big whopping clinical effect size, but it's absolutely clearly there, And there's a population variance. Some people may be more responsive and some people may be less responsive. Again, it's critically important to be cognizant, and all of you know that ADHD symptoms are really in the center and merge with so many other psychiatric and behavioral problems in kids, autistic spectrum things, dyslexia, aggressive and impulsive disorders, and that these diagnoses are descriptions of clinical phenomena and they're not necessarily explanations or biological explanations. But we can look at the impact of omega-3 fatty acids on many of these other components. In my opinion, for example, in autism, I don't think omega-3 fatty acids are going to cure or prevent autism. But if I have an autistic kid with behavioral and impulsive problems, I would want to see what I can do to cure their, to help their diet so that we assist this vulnerable brain. Quiet down the microbiome, give it the right nutrition, and help mediate and control symptoms, phenomena. Is that clear? So, I stole some of these slides from my good friend, with permission, from my good friend Alexander Richardson. He did, this is one example for work in the Oxford Durham trial, or randomized placebo-controlled trial, fatty acids in kids with developmental coordination disorder. Again, it was an entry point for this sort of complex stuff of problem. 40% were behind achievement in reading and spelling. 30% scored the clinical range for ADHD. They all had motor coordination disorder problems. This is the treatment effect size of the group assigned active versus placebo, active in red, placebo in green, for scores comparing the beginning and the end. Improvements in ADHD symptomatology, improvements in inattention, improvements in the global scale, lots of improvements in cognitive disorders, not so much in social problems and perfectionism. You can see it was impacting parameters beyond attention and beyond hyperactivity. It was making an impact on rude and disruptive behaviors. Here was a phenomenal finding that we think is replicating, and that was improvements in literacy skills. They were given the omega-3 fatty acids for 3 months, and in 3 months, the active group here had a 9-month improvement in reading age. Given for 3 months, they had a 9-month gain in reading improvements and a 6-month gain in spelling improvements. In contrast, the placebo group had no significant, they got it for 3 months, they had 3 months of improvement. And in the spelling, they actually fell back. So it's difficult to do these trials. I don't think there's enough data right now to make national policy recommendations, but I think for your community, it's sure something you might want to try. So here's some other data in improved attention parameters again down in Sweden, using chocolate-flavored spreads that had just a little bit of omega-3 fatty acids in them. And they had improvements in the placebo and the abnormal scores. So basic parameter is that learning is easier when your brain is fed. And we know that in our school lunch programs that some food is better than no food. And we can do a few tweaks to get the right brain nutrient foods instead of flaming Cheetos. We might release better potential. So a little bit about anger and aggression. Aristotle says that anybody can become angry. That's easy. But be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way. That is not within everybody's power, and that is not easy. Anger is useful. hones my edge and gets me, I told you I'm angry at stuff. You gotta be angry at the right way. So, anger is a limbic reaction. You have to have frontal cortex and judgment comparing and making it right. You have to have the question is, does nutrition of the brain help you get more Aristotelian anger? This is more what we're looking at in this country. And we're asking this question. So I participated in early work in this question of fish and omega-3s, and again I went back to cross-national epidemiology as the first level of question. We found across 36 countries that there was a 30-fold increase in homicide deaths in countries that eat little fish in comparison to those that eat a great deal of fish. Again, it's an association, and it's not specific for omega-3s. The curve looked strikingly familiar to me when we looked at the levels of omega-3 fatty acids in the blood of perpetrators of domestic violence in comparison to the corticotrophin releasing factor, indicating that low omega-3 fatty acids are associated with the hyperactivity of the stress axis and greater vulnerability. And also we looked across time and across countries for this component of the omega-6 fatty acids. Within each of these countries, as time moved from the 60s to the 2000s, higher homicide deaths were associated with greater levels of omega-3 fatty acids. And P times 1 times 10 to the minus 40th indicates that it's unlikely to be due to chance. Difficult to do randomized placebo-controlled trials lowering omega-6s in people, much better to follow Bernard Gesch's paradigm in this exquisitely done and lauded study of prisoners in England. We looked at rates of disciplinary incidents before supplementation and after supplementation, and found among the intervention was very low levels of essential fatty acids plus DRI levels of minerals and vitamins. Just ensuring that people in prison got what was already recommended, in contrast to a placebo on top of a regular diet. So in this randomized placebo-controlled trial, there was a 37% reduction in these disciplinary incidents. What were they? They were new convictions for felony-level violent offenses committed in the prison. 37% reduction in convictions for felony-level violent offenses committed in the prison. So for, I don't know, 75 cents a day times how many people, how much does one felony-level conviction cost the prison and the state? Well, you've got the medical care for the person who was injured. You've got to pay for the, which is going to be $60,000. You got to prosecute and detain the perpetrator and put him in prison for another 10 years. Get out of here. You prevent one event of felony level violence. You have saved a ton of money. So this data was replicated by Zalberg in the Netherlands, and Barbara Meyer in Australia is striving to replicate it. It's very difficult to do studies in prison. People don't want to change and they want to go home alive every day. They don't like academics coming and messing with their systems. And I get that. But I'm very compelled by those data. Other data that got me involved with Adrian Rain was a study in children in Mauritius that was a prevention of lifetime criminal offending and psychiatry. The intervention program is 83 kids, aged 3 to 5. They got a structured lunch program with a hot meal of fish. They got fruit juice, mutton or chicken, and a salad every day, and they got physical exercise and more education. Control group had the usual family conditions, MASH and temperament, lunch, bread only, bread and rice, or rice only. You think we had it bad, huh? Rice only for lunch? Who wants to eat rice only for lunch every day? There. This intervention, this combined intervention at age 3 to 5, especially in the malnourished kids, markedly diminished conduct disorder at age 17, lower schizotypic personality at age 23, and at age 23, criminal offending was 36% in the control group and almost half in the enriched group. If we want to prevent violence and aggression, nourish the brain correctly early on when it's forming, it needs to be done. I don't know whether we need another study to make that case. While most children lose their temper from time to time, children with conduct disorder frequently display high-intensity antisocial behavior. And we were fortunate enough to get some data on delinquency and conduct disorder. So I got up with Adrian Rain, wonderful guy, and we collaborated and got funds to do this study in Mauritius, another study with another group of kids, 18 to 16, getting either a gram a day of omega-3 fatty acids in this delicious Norwegian product called Smartfish, or a placebo and smoothie, and we gave it for 6 months, and then stopped doing it for 6 months, and then measured it at 12 months. So here is reductions in the child's reports of their proactive regression and reactive regression. Went down in 6 months when we were given the fatty acids, and bounced back up to 12 months when they were no longer getting it. What was interesting is that there was a residual effect. This is the kids' report. This is the teacher's report in delinquency. While they were getting it, it didn't really change much, but there was a residual effect, 40% decrease in delinquency scores. It was residual for 12 months. So the data, actually, the kids internalizing behavior scores, again scored by others, there was a residual effect. And callous and unemotional behavior, which is so hard to treat, sociopathy, was residual at 12 months. So what is going on in this 6-month time period that's having a residual impact on the kids? And what we found is that you give the omega-3 fatty acids to the kids and their behavior improves. Guess what? The parents' psychopathology goes down. Give it to the kids, the parents are happier, the family dynamic changes. And that was residual, and that's what was going on. It was a direct biological effect on the kids, translated to the parents, and then it was residual for 12 months after the parents. I think this is phenomenally important because it shows like a wave spreading and how you can improve society by diminishing the violence and aggression of the few. Things are less terrifying. Big effect sizes, by the way. So there's been a meta-analysis on studies of aggression. I don't think it's a great meta-analysis. It had 40 studies, 7,000 participants, lots of different effect sizes. The majority were observational research, very few randomized trials, and they are concluding to have a good impact, but not. We need bigger and better studies in violence and aggression before we can really make any definitive statements.
Yeah.
All the Brits say, oh yeah, I like tenants. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a male, hand here. I can't tell. I don't think that's a mom lighting a cigarette. I may be wrong. At any rate, so addictions. A little bit of background on addictions. Addictions are reward-driven. Again, you need dopamine. You anticipate having a beer after this lecture. You anticipate, addicts anticipate having opiates or dopamine. It causes a release of dopamine from the ventral tegmental area, including the heart. reinforcement and habits in these areas, the nucleus accumbens and dorsal striatum, which then recirculates into the frontal cortex, and hopefully you have executive control. It says, yeah, I'll have one beer. It's okay, I enjoyed it, fine, I'm done. I can stop, and I can anticipate that if I drive home drunk, I might get arrested. Well, in addicts, that executive control gets overridden, and the cues and the craving go into different circuits, especially emotional circuits, and the positive emotions reinforce this whole thing. Now, with withdrawal of heavy drinking, you get excitation of the stress axis and stress responses, and for addicts, the negative emotions also start to become rewarding. You know, the old adage that it's better to feel something than to feel nothing at all. You know, if I had no bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. The negative emotions become rewarding. And how do you overcome it? Well, you take more of the drug, and you release more dopamine until things happen in the brain where the dopamine becomes depleted. And that's why you see addicts walking around sort of in a zombie-like state without pleasure and without hope. And in part, that's because their dopamine is depleted. And they don't have a capacity to react to the world with joy and anticipation anymore. So the chronic addictive state is habitual. All of these circuits have been reinforced and are like exercise. They can do those things really well. And they need to be moved from that paradigm. And it's low dopamine, trying to reward the dopamine, and entrained is this negative emotion stress axis. You have to figure out what to do to the tissue and what to do to the behavior to shift that paradigm. Shift it away from being reinforced by negativity and shift it toward positivity. So one component, I believe, is, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Ask the question, what's the role of omega-3s here? So observational data, glucose branching, looking at addicts, polysubstitute users, and those with the lowest levels of DHA in the blood at the highest risk of relapse. And when we looked at rhesus monkey studies, we took a frontal cortex biopsy at baseline, we put them onto a low omega-3 diet. They were getting fish protein here. This is more like a 7-Eleven or a typical Midwestern diet without alcohol, and then low omega-3 Midwestern diet, high omega-6 with alcohol, and biopsy at 2.5 years and 5 years. You see the DHA here is about 14% of the fatty acids in the brain, which is normal across mammalian species. Diet alone included the omega-3s. Diet and alcohol depleted the omega-3s by half in the brain of a primate, which is a pretty good model for us. Diet alone was bad enough. Diet plus alcohol depleted by half. And so one model here is if you're eating a Mediterranean diet, one-to-one omega-3s and omega-6s, move to long chains, you've got the elongation, so your brain is happy. It's about balance. You take alcohol and smoke, reactive oxygen species and calories of alcohol produces a lot of free radicals. Free radicals destroy those beautiful polyunsaturated bonds and depletes the brain of the long-chain fatty acids, like a drip, drip, drip. All the good stuff is dripping out because it's being oxidized. So the body reacts by increasing the elongation of the saturation from the short chains to the long chains, and in normal circumstances restores it. Now what if the diet is the current US diet, it's full of 6s, very few 3s, same thing happens, except when the brain is depleted, the brain doesn't get restored to a normal balance. It gets restored to high omega-6s that are pro-inflammatory, and and high omega-6s that are going to make endocannabinoid-like molecules and deplete dopamine. So, model here is that, great, you finally get somebody into rehab. They finally hit bottom enough, say, I gotta stop drinking, I gotta stop the substance, and I really want to make an effort to it. That's great. You stopped the drip. You've turned off the faucet here. But the brain is left in this state of habitual low dopamine habits, and it's left in this state of high omega-6 fatty acids. And I don't think that's optimal to help recovery. So we did a test and did a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial of addicts who were about 10 years or more, drinking a liter a day for 10 years or so. These were aggressive alcoholics, 96 of them. So kept them in an inpatient unit for 21 days, did baseline testing, randomized them to omega-3 fatty acids, 2 grams a day, DHA plus EPA, comparison oil, and then sent them out as outpatients and followed them for 12 weeks and did follow-up. They all got psychotherapy during this time. So 99 randomized, 48 to control, 48 to omega-3s. So of those who were assigned to take omega-3s, and we intended them to take them, 12 dropped out, and 8 of them said, I don't intend to take it. I can imagine alcoholics lying to us. That's shocking. These were the ones that elevated their blood levels of omega-3s because tissues reissued, and those that were unchanged. So when we look at the change in omega-3 fatty acids in the blood, this is zero change here on the x-axis, and how many days of heavy drinking in the 90 days of the study. That's heavy drinking, that's 6 drinks or more per day for men, 5 for women. So here, if you were assigned placebo, the change in omega-3s, most people didn't change very much. One person in the placebo group started eating fish. The rest of them kind of stayed around normal. Here's the blue in the active assignment. So you can see this cluster of red people around no change in omega-3 fatty acids that have these high levels of drinking in 90 days. So we can say, what's the odds ratio of 10 drinks or more per day versus less than 10 per day? And we'll compare those that elevated their fatty acids to those that stayed the same. So here's 10 drinks or more per day. If they had no omega-3 elevation, they were almost 7 times as likely to have 10 heavy drinks per day. 7 times per likely. About the same for 20 or 5. Then when we add in other factors in the equation, the only other factor that mattered was whether they accepted placement to sober housing or not. If they didn't take sober housing, they were 5 times more likely. Once we control for that variable, the omega-3 effect became more powerful. It was 10 times more likely. This is unpublished data, and we need more studies to it. But you show me anything else that has this level of promise for substance use. That'd be great. So we can do some fun thought experiments and say, if this is all true and this higher level of omega-6s are coming in society, does it correlate with higher alcohol drinking? And this is estimated blood levels of 3 HUPAs from 1933, 1970s, and the amount of alcohol sold per capita in the U.S. And that's kind of frightening. So it's just a little fun thought experiment. It doesn't prove anything. It makes me very suspicious about the role of soybean oil in our society. And we looked at smoking in the whole stock. And here's levels of omega-3 intake from the mothers who are in pregnancy. That British study I showed you, again, 6 levels of intake from the moms. And this is the number of cigarettes smoked per day pre-pregnancy, and there's kind of a dose-response relationship between higher fish consumption, lower cigarette smoking, into an area of research that I haven't done any primary work on, but my colleagues have, and I think that it's really fundamentally important to this whole story. And that is to understand and start to appreciate what's going on in the gut microbiome. And that is because we have a huge colon, and it's full of infected stuff. And our whole, our whole digestive tract has as many bacteria and as many cells as our body does. And they can be either symbiotic and harmonious with us, or they can act like an infection because of the different species. So this illustrates gut microbiota, and that they're releasing neurotransmitters, and they're releasing short-chain fatty acids and affecting the circulatory system, affecting the immune system, and affecting the brain. And the brain has a lot of feedback. And the vagus nerve is the biggest nerve coming out of the body, almost sort of like a second spinal cord. And that vagus nerve heavily innervates not only the heart, but the gut. And the gut has 80% of all the immune cells in it. So it's very important to pay attention. So in terms of the bugs in your body, your stomach has 0 to 10 to the 2 times different species of bacteria in the guts, and the colon, and the jejunum, proximal jejunum, and live there. There's 10 to 100 trillion organisms inside our body. And if you want to read more about this, please look at the book by John Cryan and Ted Feenan called The Psychobiotic Revolution. He's a very world-recognized investigator in court. He really gives us a very balanced point of view. So it affects all these systems. So how do we change? What are the basic principles and how do we change the gut floral microbiome? It's impossible to know every detail. I tried to get every detail of these guys. And what they start to tell me is that actually what we need, the sign of health is a more diverse gut microbiome. And in that diversity, that's harmonious. When you get tilted to one species only, then you start to have infective problems and other problems. How do we change it? Well, diet is critical to gut health, and without question, the most important thing is plant-based diets. They increase microbial diversity and short-chain fatty acid production, and plant-based diets keep the bowel moving. So you get a refreshment of everything going on in the system. When you talk to your clients, especially with developmental disabilities, you may find out these guys are having a bowel movement once every 3 days, or once a week. And they're carrying around infections and really fighting themselves. Carbohydrate and fiber intake positively impacts microbial diversity. Western diet damages, or Midwestern diet, damages gut permeability and diversity. So here's just a good picture of that. The non-Western diet, many more bifidobacter and Bacteroides, fewer of these toxic species of commences, food mood disorders. Here, Western diets, fewer bifidobacter, Bacteroides, more Fumaroides, fewer short-chain fatty acids. And sort of a simplistic view, but I think that's all you really need to know about it in many ways at this point. So, the GI transit times, 50% of the stomach contents are emptied in 60 minutes after consumption. The small intestine, clear after 1 to 2 hours. And colon transit is between 12 and 50 hours. And the hint here is that slower does not always mean better. So exercise also important. So when you get somebody with developmental disabilities, get them physically moving. It also helps to get their mental problem. And here's just some more painstaking detail about various mechanisms of tryptophan metabolism and the stress axis, back and forth. For normal gut microbiota, eubiosis, altered gut microbiota, dysbiosis. Here's a more inflammatory gut, abnormal neurotransmitters being produced, and abnormal stress axis. So the goals are to increase the diversity of the gut microbiome, and infections take over, and the to-do list for keeping your gut microbiome healthy is to feed the gut better. Feed plants, keep the gut mobile. A diverse diet equals a diverse microbiome. We know that higher omega-3 fatty acids will tilt the biome to the healthy bacteria instead of the toxic bacteria. So feed it, exercise it, definitely move the body, use the bowels, establish daily habits, subject to use circadian rhythms. Are probiotics really helpful in changing gut microbiota and for psychiatric health? We don't know yet. A lot of people who say, without data that the probiotics work, there's not enough data in my mind to really give you good advice one way or the other. I follow the Greeks, though. Good yoga. So, here comes to the practical. All this information I've given you, you need to go home and do something. What do you do, and what guidance can you get? Greater simplicity and clarity. What should we do for ourselves, our children, and our patients? So, worked a lot with the military. This is one way of getting information and translating it. Dietary orders from top military leaders. Write a notice to the men. A healthy diet makes a healthy brain. I'm very impressed. I wonder where he gets his information. Probably from some medical journal. There he is. In the cereal box. You'll consider the sources of information. So the dietary guidelines for Americans, what does it say about fish consumption? Strong evidence has shown that eating patterns that include seafood reduce heart disease. Moderate evidence that eating patterns are associated with reduced risk of obesity. Emerging evidence eating patterns in cognitive and psychiatric disorders, and omega-3 fatty acids found in seafood are important. There's a broad range of diseases that are impacted by seafood and omega-3 consumption. There's old data that I produced in 2006 to illustrate the point. Here's omega-3 fatty acids across countries. 36 countries, and the relationship between higher fish, primarily fish consumption of omega-3s, decreases in all-cause mortality in men, death from all causes before age 75, even bigger impact in women. So if you don't want to die early, listen to what I'm saying and do something about it. It doesn't matter that much to you. Then it doesn't matter that much to you. Stroke mortality, cardiovascular mortality, men, women, coronary heart disease mortality. Again, reviewing the data on homicide mortality, post-natal depression, major depression, bipolar disorder. So, here's I think the state of play. A patient comes and says, "Doc, I heard that changing my diet can help my mental health. What can you do for me, Doc?" And the current state of play is the doc says, "Great idea. I think this is cool, but I'm not an expert in diet or nutrition." He's smart enough to say that. So let me consult a dietitian. Dietitian, let's talk about this. The dietitian says, "Oh, what a great idea, but I don't have any guidance for mental health and nutrition. And there's no insurance reimbursement. I'm trying to work with the American Dietetics Association, and finally, actually, they have created a new certification for dietitians in their level of competence for providing mental health advice. I think for your population, of developmental disabilities and intellectual difficulties, it's again another full challenge for mental health. And I think you have to be creative and enlist dietitians, enlist systems, and talk and figure out what works and what doesn't work. But I think you'll feel great benefits. So what diet for mental health? If I can only choose one diet to apply broadly to the whole population, not consider the diversity of humanity and diversity of special needs, I'm going to have to go with what is largely called the Mediterranean diet pattern, which is composed of these critical components. Fish 2 to 3 times a week. Not necessarily fried fish 2 to 3 times a week. I know, this is fish fry land. I had delicious fried perch last night. You know, but fried perch, especially in olive oil, is better than flaming Cheetos. Olive oil, not vegetable oils. We'll get into that. Avoid high processed carbohydrates. Go back to the regular national potatoes. More fruits and vegetables. I really question whether or not, I think, not meat, red meat, maybe not every day, but don't eliminate red meat from your diet completely. It's a really critical brain component of nutrients in meat. We're throwing away a lot of liver that we shouldn't throw away. You know, Wisconsin embraced the Braunschweiger. Reintroduce it in the diet, reintroduce it in the kids' diet. Incredibly brain-dense food on Braunschweiger. All right, here's the slide that you've all been waiting for. So how much omega-3 should I take and how am I going to get them, Doc? So here's one way to look at it. So 2 grams a day of EPA and DHA is a really good target, especially in a high omega-6 background diet. So how are you going to get it? So there are largely sort of 3 classes of fatty acid supplements out there in the marketplace. Unconcentrated fatty acids, molecularly distilled fatty acids, and highly purified omega-3 fatty acids. So unconcentrated ones are the cheapest. Typically 120 milligrams of EPA and 180 for 1,000 milligram capsule. So that means in 1 capsule, in the unconcentrated, you get 300 milligrams of EPA and DHA. So if you take it in unconcentrated form, in order to get this target of 2 grams a day, you need to take 7 capsules a day. And I've tried it, and I can't do it. I don't think anybody can.
Yeah.
1 capsule a day is not adequate. 250 milligrams a day is adequate. At least 1 gram a day, push 2 grams a day. Molecularly distilled is a great compromise. So it's a 1,000 milligram capsule, and it's approximately half of that oil is EPA and DHA. And so for 2,000 milligrams a day, 4 capsules. It's not bad. Pop them in the morning with your toothpaste and toothbrush. You can take it as capsules. You can take it, a lot of kids actually like the liquid forms of the omega-3s better. Again, there's the specialized things like Orleans emulsions and Nordic Naturals make those emulsions. You've got to kind of figure out what you like. So the moderate expense in that. There's pharmaceutical grade omega-3 fatty acids, highly purified, 1,100 milligram capsule, about 1,000 milligrams. You take 2 capsules a day. This is prescription strength version of hypertriglyceridemia. Is that helpful? Very good. Again, I'm going to repeat this slide because it's so important. Tissue is the issue. I don't know if I mentioned that. You want to dial in your tissue. 50-50 is a pretty good Mediterranean target. Omega-3 index of 12, you can get your blood tested. Again, if you're a soybean oil diet, high omega-6s, it'll take you 2 grams a day to get there. If you back off to an olive oil diet, you can get there on a lot less, 75 milligrams a day, a gram a day. Okay? Repetition is the mother of learning. So linoleic acid is 2 to 3% of energy in traditional Mediterranean diets because Mediterranean diets use olive oil as the principal source of fat. There's enough backlash from people who believe in corn oil, and billions of dollars are made in corn and soybean oil, that they impacted the dietary guidelines in the US. And I reviewed it, and it came to the NIH, and said we want to advocate a Mediterranean diet. And people should take fruits, vegetables, and liquid oils. So wait a second. It's not a Mediterranean diet. Every study that scores a Mediterranean diet, you say liquid oils, you mean vegetable oils. You get a lower score on the Mediterranean diet for vegetable oils, and a higher score on the Mediterranean diet for olive oil. So hello guys, let's say Mediterranean diet should have olive oil. Big pushback. Couldn't get it through. This is another slide you should take pictures of. Figuring out how to do it. So mix the 6. Avoid sunflower oils, safflower, corn, peanut. Canola oil is better. Flaxseed oil is really hard to use in cooking in most applications. You can use safflower oil and some soybean oil if it's called high oleic oils. And those high oleic means that they have the same oil as olive oil. They're low omega-6 and high omega-3. They're low omega-6 oils. And then, macadamia especially. Olive oil should be your go-to oil. And for frying stuff, safflower oil, and if you can get avocado oil, that's pretty cool stuff.
Where does avocado oil fit?
Avocado oil is very much like olive oil, and it's primarily because they're both fruits. Coconut oil is very low omega-6. I don't think it has its uses. All right, so if you're going to do a quick fix to your diet, and you want to take the 100 most frequently consumed foods in America that have a high omega-6 score, you eliminate these 10 foods, or switch them out, and you will go a huge way to fix your diet. Get rid of these 10, right? Soybean oil, mayonnaise, yo baby, Dove margarine, microwave margarine, oh yeah, Italian salad dressing, not made from olive oil. Whenever you see anything that says vegetable oils or mixed vegetable oils, that's code for soybean and corn, and not olive. Potato chips more sparingly, stick margarine, and butter, vegetable shortening, peanut butter, unfortunately, is. So you want to go the positive end, what you should eat. I think a really good direction, I'm not convinced that we need more, but a really good direction is the brain food scale, the foods developed by Drew Ramsey and our group. So given the high burden of disability, the rank foods, with nutrients, B12, long-chain fatty acids, iron, other 8 different nutrients, and figure out which of these foods are the most nutrient dense. And antioxidants, so based on brain essential nutrients. So several brain essential nutrients are only found in meat, seafood, eggs, and dairy. And they're generally excluded in lists of superfoods and excluded from their brain nutrient density. Again, this is the paradigm of dietitians and nutritionists having nutrition stop at the neck. You want to advocate thinking about nutrition for the brain. So what are they? So, top 20 brain foods in animals. Oysters, clams, beef spleen, and honey. Chicken liver, mussels, clams, poultry giblets, octopus, eggs, beef kidney. I don't find seal and caribou, cuttlefish or whale, bluefish, tuna, elk, smelts, and herrings. top brain food, mustard greens, spinach. French fries are not mentioned in any of these lists, okay? But I get it with French fries, okay? They're the devil's food, right?
Yeah.
They're hot, they're lovely, they're salty, they call to you, I give in, right? I made a big impact on Congressman John Larson, whose congressional district is Sandy Hook, is in his district, and he called us in to try to find out preventive measures for violence and aggression. Given the talk to him, I'm sometimes a dramatic person. I had that slide of soybean oil saying, these are insurgents in the food supply. I was prepared. I had a test tube that had taken French fries from a fast food restaurant that was sitting in the fryer, oil was in the fryer all week, right? Put the French fries in there, took the French fries out and extracted all the fatty acids. Put them in the test tube. Turn that test tube, that is the nastiest, most disgusting thing you can possibly imagine. Look at this. This is what we're putting in our kids' brains. It's highly oxidized, highly sludgy stuff. This is what we're making their brains out of. How do you expect them, how do you expect any other result other than violence, depression, misery when you make brains out of this? French fries are not on the list, okay? You can make them at home with olive oil or with avocado oil or with other oils. But currently what you've got, and you eat them sparingly. They should be a treat food. Just get rid of everything fried and especially devil's food. Mussels and shellfish are clearly brain food. I hope we can, I have great hope brain muscles. We can increase them. This is another slide you should take a picture of. EFAeducation.com has great resources if you want to lower your sixes and raise your threes. It gives you information to how to get a blood test, to not guess where you are, but get actual numbers where you are. So if your tissue is the issue, you can get your number where you are on that spectrum. You'll be disgusted. I thought I was a lot better than I was. I was embarrassed. We're not telling you that. Other really great sources of information about how to communicate people eat fish, especially the Seafood Nutrition Partnership, Linda Cornish. This website is absolutely fabulous. Alex Richardson in England has been running this thing for more than 15 years. The Food and Behavior Research website they have, they spell it wrong. She's really collected decades worth of data, and it's highly informative. Here's some information from the Seafood Nutrition Partnership. I was going to see. Not locate internet server. I was going to bring you to the website and show you some of their information. What they've done is to get a lot of consumer feedback, especially with kids and with parents, as what are cheap, attractive meals that you can make with seafood. How to use tuna, how to use sardines, so people will eat them, and so people will consume them. How to get it cheaply, how to get it in easy-to-fix meals, so that even people in Wisconsin embrace seafood. Did I just say that? Really, a great website, Seafood Nutrition Partnership, a lot of downloadable information to share. Now, I want to challenge you, because even in West Virginia they did it. There's Gary McDaniels, Social Worker of the Year, West Virginia, 2010. He got going in the middle school a sardine club. So they had once a week. He came in and made a special table for cool kids to eat sardines. And they had a great video of the kids all you know, oh, sardines, I love them. And another table full of parents, we're going to have sardines. The parents all get up, ew! The kids are loving it. I said, sardines are great food. If they can do it in West Virginia. All right, we have a little bit of time, and I'll save this also for questions. So, since I was giving you the complete Joe Hibbeln story, you might have suspected by this time that I'm rather imaginative and creative guy, which sometimes gets me into trouble. So, I've thought a lot about fish and its impact on society, its impact on the brain. And I was in traffic one day. And I'm a psychiatrist. And the car in front of me had the symbol of the fish, and it said peace. I said, this is not random. Why would the word peace be associated with this Christian symbol of fish? So I hired a cultural anthropologist for a year, and we did some exploring and produced a paper. So this is a question for cultural anthropology. So if there's a strong biological association between fish consumption and the reduction of depression, aggression, violence, and mental health, then I'm not the first guy to figure this out. Humans are very sensitive and make associations about what's good and what works. So if fish are associated, if they do this and change emotions, then are fish also associated symbolically with happiness, peace, and harmony? And does it happen across cultures? Or does it happen across time? Different little experimental spots of humanity. See, we published this. Reputable journal. So, and the purpose of this examination of religious and cultural symbols of fish, I'm using it as to provide us tools to learn from our ancestors, to teach us how to proliferate peaceful and harmonious states. So, how does the brain form a symbol? How does it learn something? Think about Pavlov and Pavlov's dog. Just a red light, unconditioned, means nothing to the dog. Flash of red light, so what? You pair the visual cortex, image of painting with a red light, with hunger. And suddenly, that processed image of a red light here in the cortex becomes neurologically connected and neurologically associated with the emotion of hunger. They become neurologically paired. Red light, hunger. Red light, hunger. Then, the emotional part of the brain, the amygdala, so the thing sits here, and then right on top of it is the hippocampus, which gates and starts to form memory. And then the neurons project from the hippocampus into the frontal cortex, which makes us really human. And it gates and projects it up there, and the cortex makes all these parallel associations of meaning. So like red dress. Red dress. Everybody has a different history, a different association when I said red dress. Each of your nervous systems have different meanings and pairings for a red dress that you acquired as a meaning over time. So what's it influenced by? It's influenced by your emotions and etc. So here's an example of a woman who sees a fish. She's initially hungry. She's heard about Mercury. Mercury's nasty. Fish is nasty. I'm not going to eat it. So how did that happen? Visual cortex saw it, It went into the emotional center of the
It
amygdala,
smells.
through the hippocampus, and gated meaning, and fed back to nasty in the reciprocating circuit. So she then comes and hears my talk. Here's somebody better than me. She says, oh, I'm going to eat the fish. She eats the fish. EPA and DHA and the other nutrients come to the brain, and they change the emotional tone of that gating circuit. Because like a drug, you've given new nutrition, and the amygdala processes with it. And then the emotional meaning behind the symbol changes. Do that again. Start off with a nasty, and actually eat it and experience it. Oh gosh, actually that's not so bad. That was delicious. It was not only delicious when I ate it, it also changed my brain, and I'm happier. So the more times I eat it, the more times I associate the fish with something good, and I associate it with this new emotion, this nutrient biology has created in my brain, and making me peaceful and happy. Do it enough times, the brain creates unconscious associations.
Christ.
Now, these are just images from Christianity, Buddhism, fish on Friday, Iranian, Persians, and no
Here they are.
more explicitly and profoundly has this association been made than in Christianity. So, and it's the religion we were most familiar with, probably, right? So, first of all, Christos is a rearrangement of the letters ichthos. It's the same. The Clement of Alexandria 433 said that. Secondly, the only miracle occurring 3 times in the Bible, the only miracle that's repeated is the multiplication of fish. After Christ is resurrected, Peter
Right there.
says, throw the fish to the right, there's a 16 great fish, bring it in, eat it, and this is the time when Christ makes Peter the first pope. He says, do you love me more than you love these? That's the fish. You do? Okay. Feed my sheep. Well, see, do you feed the sheep just the word of God, or do you actually also physically feed them the fish? And I posit to you that if you feed the fish and it makes people less violent and less aggressive, biologically, that complements the word and the faith spiritually. And this is not only my opinion, this is what got encoded into dietary laws of Christianity in 1242 to 1246 in Vatican I. To eat fish on Fridays, on Wednesdays, and on Christian feast days in order to gain the identity of being a Christian. And they say Christianity is the only religion where you eat your God to become your God. You commune to eat symbolically, and I can tell you for certain that the Last Supper on a Friday night in a Judaic place had 3 components: bread, wine, and everything happens in 3's fish. It's part of it. Now, marry this to the biochemistry of fish that I showed you about the reduction of depression and the reduction of violence. You know, this is, gee, if you eat more fish, are you able to turn the other cheek better? Well, maybe there isn't a disparagement or disharmony of science and religion. Maybe it's working together. So many images of Christ and fish. The Pope's Great Seal is the ring of the fisherman. This also occurs, these paradigms occur across all the major religions. In Chinese medicine, in Taoism, certainly the yin and yang. This is called the fish symbol, by the way. And largely, you know, you have this balance of yin foods and yang foods. If somebody's out of balance in their yin and yang, you can fix their diet. And what's the most yin food? Cold water seafood. Help calm you down? Probably. French fries are more yangy. So flying in, sitting on a fish without some compassion. And Shinto, this really happy guy, Lucy, prosperity, he's holding the fish. Always holding the fish. Hinduism, the origin and the end is hold fish. And the final slide, I'm making it on time, dramatically. Okay, you love this one, right? This is the salmon of knowledge. I'm going to leave you with the thoughts of the salmon of knowledge. So, the druid, Finnegas, guarded the salmon of knowledge for 7 years, knowing that whoever ate it would have all knowledge. Pretty cool job for a druid, guarding the salmon of knowledge. So, the teacher instructs his student, his pupil, Deme, Finon Nakagawa in the skies, and helped him roast the salmon. And while he's roasting it, the student sucked his thumb when the hot juices squirted on him, and the student gained all knowledge. There is this profound association between fish and the gaining of knowledge and peacefulness and harmony that we should not ignore. So I would say, like we're doing with science, religion, and the US government agree, which is pretty remarkable, to eat more omega-3s. They don't always agree on mixing the 6, but absolutely on eating omega-3s. Omega-3s, by the way, were named by Ralph Holman, who was a Minnesotan. The proper chemical name is N-3, number of carbons. And Ralph said it's not quite right. So I asked him at an AOCS meeting before he passed away, Ralph, how did you name it? Because I'm interested in naming symbols. And so you could tell him he'd been asked the question for a long time, forever. He said, well, I was in church, and I heard about the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. And I knew that was the right name for these molecules. So there you go. Thank you very much for your attention.